Why has official history robbed us of the most sacred truth?
What have the Western calendar and snow hidden about the original cradle of light? And why were the African gods erased when they gave us the mother, the sun, and the mystery of resurrection? Let's break the code. This is the Forbidden Christmas, the African gods who inspired the birth of the Chosen One. Prepare to unravel the royal lineage of the Renaissance, tracing each symbol, from the golden halo of the saints to the solstice rite, back to its undeniable source, Africa, the mother of all wisdom. Your faith and your history will never be the same again. Before we delve into this ancient secret, leave your mark. Subscribe to the channel, like this revelation, and comment on where in the world you're hearing this prophecy finally being fulfilled. The veil between what we've been told and the truth begins to tear in the darkness of the winter solstice. While most of the Western world celebrates the miracle of Christmas under the snow and the pine tree, we here lean over scrolls and stones to ask, what does this light, this rebirth of hope, conceal beneath the warm sands of a much older continent? The story we are about to unravel is not blasphemy, but a foundation, a mystery guarded for ages. It is the ancestral feeling that the zenith of darkness always heralds the return of the sun, a promise that nature itself whispered to the first peoples who looked to the sky. In every culture that flourished from east to west, the need to celebrate the rising sun has always been a sacred rite. But in Africa, this celebration was not just hope. It was science, it was cosmology, a profound understanding of the cycles that govern life and death, winter and harvest. What lies beneath the weight of official history is the echo of drums and bonfires that burned brightly long before any candle was lit. It is the revelation that the architecture of our faith, the structure of our life cycle, was already standing firm on the banks of the Nile and in the lands of Kush. So, allow doubt to take hold and curiosity to guide you. If the light of the world is always reborn, and if the place where the sun has the most power is its true birthplace, where do you really think this story began? We speak of Christmas, a word that, at its Latin core, means birth. But what lies behind this simple linguistic root? It's not just about celebrating a day, but about honoring the concept of the divine bursting into matter, an idea that echoes through all ancient temples, including those built long before the founding of Rome. The mystery arises when we realize that the birth of the light of the world was already the pinnacle of faith in African lands, within a cosmology called Kemet. The true revelation, you can bet, is that the profound symbolism, the promise of a savior who emerges in the darkest hour of the year, was not invented, but inherited from a deeper and more ancient knowledge. Consider the journey of the concept. The idea of a sun/sun, a powerful linguistic coincidence, traveled from the banks of the Nile, rising through centers of knowledge and commerce, where it merged and transformed. This African wisdom was the seed that fertilized the narratives of countless cultures that would flourish centuries later, spreading the seed of divine birth. Spiritually, the truth behind the name is about renewal. The true light we seek is not a one-time event, but an eternal cycle of hope that repeats itself with each turn of the sun. It is a teaching that connects us to the ancestral principle that life always triumphs over chaos, knowledge that ancient African astronomers already mastered. But if this light was first born in Kemet, and if the idea of a divine solar calendar was already on the map, where exactly do we need to look to find the majestic civilizations that organize time around this prophecy? It is to the south, to the kingdoms of gold and stone, that we now turn to trace the map of this influence. The scenario we need to visualize is vast and powerful, extending beyond the borders we know today, encompassing the map of Kush, Nubia, and Abyssinia. Folks, we're talking about the first millennium before any modern reckoning, a time when Africa was not marginal, but the axis of knowledge and economic power. In this historical geographical tapestry, the mystery lies not in the birth itself, but in how these civilizations managed to decipher the sky with such precision. They possessed solar and stellar calendars that harmonized religious life with agriculture, proving that the connection between the divine and the material was inseparable and profoundly practical. The symbolic journey of this era shows that controlling time was controlling destiny. Kings and priests were guardians of this knowledge, using the solstice not only to celebrate, but to plan harvests and ensure the stability of the empire, making the sun an omnipresent ruler. The spiritual unfolding lies in realizing that the foundation of these cultures was the principle of Ma'at, the cosmic order. The birth of a new god or a new sun was a reaffirmation that chaos had been tamed once again, an immense comfort for a people who lived under the strict laws of nature. These were not second-hand cultures, they were beacons of innovation. But if the precision of the calendar was already linked to the cycle of death and life, who exactly was the central god who personified this eternal promise of resurrection, and how did his myth become the model for all the chosen ones who came after? At the heart of this solar cosmology lies the most powerful of cosmic dramas, the cycle of Osiris, Isis, and Horus. It is the sacred triad that teaches us about death, which is not an end but a journey, and birth, which is always a miracle. Osiris, the god who taught civilization, was betrayed, dismembered, and, out of love, resurrected, becoming the lord of the underworld. The most astonishing mystery, my God, is the birth of Horus. He is the divine child conceived after the death of his father through the magic and unwavering devotion of Isis. She, the mother goddess, is the guardian of life and prophecy, becoming the womb where hope germinated amidst grief. This is the oldest and most complete narrative of a virgin birth, centuries before any scroll in the Levant. Isis' journey with the infant Horus through the swamp, hiding him from Set, the lord of chaos, is the very journey of faith and maternal protection. It is the struggle of vulnerable light against absolute darkness. The boy was not just a son, he was the winged heir, the rising sun destined to restore order and reclaim the throne of time and eternity. Spiritually, Horus personifies triumph over adversity, the promise that divine lineage always prevails over destruction. He is the light that, even at the lowest point of the solar cycle, the solstice, ensures the turning point and renewal of life on Earth. This principle of cyclical rebirth was the backbone of all Egypt and its neighboring kingdoms. The goddess who gave birth to the reborn sun inevitably became the most sacred image of motherhood throughout antiquity. But how did the visual representation of Isis breastfeeding her son Horus migrate so directly and almost untouched into the icons of the mother goddess that we know today? That's where the secret of visuality deepens. The power of the image, lies in its permanence. The goddess Isis, in her most revered form, Isis lactans, was the icon of sacred motherhood, seen in statues and frescoes throughout Egypt and spread across ports and cities of the Roman Empire. She is seated, with her calm expression, nurturing the infant Horus in her lap. The mystery lies not in the similarity, but in the almost literal transcription. As Christianity consolidated itself, especially in Egypt, territory we now call Coptic, the strong popular devotion to Isis could not simply be extinguished. She was subtly renamed. The mother goddess, with her divine son, became the virgin and child. The icon's journey is a testament to the tenacity of popular faith. When an image resonates so deeply in the soul of a people, it survives doctrinal changes. The features, the pose, the tenderness, even the colors have traveled through time and space, ensuring that the symbolism of divine birth and maternal protection remains central, no matter what new name is given to heaven. The spiritual unfolding of this transition is monumental. It shows that the sacred feminine principle, the power of creation and nurturing, has its undeniable and original source in Africa. The strength of the universal mother, the first mother of God, is an African legacy that has shaped the religious iconography of the world. But if even the most intimate image of Christmas has an African origin, what were the original rites that celebrated this epiphany of light on the banks of the Nile? It is in the sounds, the warmth, and the darkness of the solstice night that we find the practices that were, in one way or another, inherited. Imagine the longest night of the year, but not the European cold, rather the dense, starry silence over the waters of the Nile. This was the moment of the Great Wait, the instant when darkness reached its peak. Spiritually, it was the final test that the sun, the mighty Ra, would be able to emerge from the bark of night and begin its new cycle. The rituals could not fail. It was not a matter of asking, but of making the return of the light happen. Large bonfires were lit on the banks, you see, and the rhythmic and incessant sound of drums and sistrums, sacred rattles, echoed to awaken the dormant energy of the universe. There were processions of priests carrying torches, ensuring that the ritual light pierced the cosmic darkness. Feel the strong, sweet scent of incense, especially myrrh and frankincense, rising to the heavens, cleansing the air and announcing the arrival of rebirth. This was the cultural journey, to transform the fear of darkness into a communal explosion of light and sound. It is a ritual that declares, loud and clear, that order will be restored. The spiritual unfolding was that the people were not spectators, but active participants in maintaining Ma'at, the cosmic order. By dancing and playing music, each person symbolically pushed the solar bark out of the underworld. The celebration of the birth of light was a collective guarantee that the cycle of life would continue, an act of profound mutual faith. These rituals of fire and light did not remain confined to the sands. If the people lit bonfires to force the sun to return, it is no wonder that, centuries later, symbols such as the evergreen tree and the golden circle of the crown appeared in other festivities. But what was the true meaning behind these symbols that today seems so mundane? If light needs to be reborn, it must have an axis, an anchor that unites earth and sky. In African tradition, this anchor is the sacred tree. In Egypt, it was the sycamore. In West Africa, other ancestral trees like the acacia. Indeed, it was not just a plant, but the very map of creation, the backbone of the cosmos that traversed all worlds. The mystery lies in its promise of immortality. Even in the most terrible droughts, the tree of life maintained its foliage and its strength. It became the vivid representation that life, even after death, like Osiris, always finds a way to sprout and renew itself. This eternal green was the revelation of the mother goddess's power to sustain the cycle. In the cultural tradition, branches of the tree were taken to rituals, and its fruits, sometimes symbolically golden, were offerings for the new cycle. It was a way of bringing the power of eternity into the home, protecting the newborn and announcing the future harvest, honoring the principle of eternal return. Spiritually, the tree of life was the place where the gods and ancestors communicated and where wisdom was found. The roots drank from the primordial waters, the trunk supported the world. This connection was vital for the priests, who sought prophecies and Ma'at to guide the people during the rebirth of the sun, at the darkest point of the year. The tree, therefore, was not merely green. It was often adorned with objects of gold, the metal of solar eternity. This leads us directly to another visual symbol that Africa gave to the world, the circle of pure light that denotes divine authority around a sacred head, what we today call a halo. If the rituals guaranteed the return of the sun, the words of the priests, engraved in stone and papyrus, gave authority to the event. In Kemet, the most sacred truths were not merely recounted, they were carved into monumental stele, textual prophecies about the birth of the one who was to come, conferring upon them a historical and spiritual weight. To imagine the discovery of a prophecy stele, a forbidden papyrus that meticulously describes the arrival of the sun child, the heir destined to reign over the cosmic order, is already a revelation. The mystery is that, for other narratives of chosen ones to flourish, these African texts had to be purposefully distorted, hidden in secret libraries, or simply labeled as pagan magic by the conquerors. The journey of this knowledge is a saga of survival. These texts were not completely destroyed. They traveled through monasteries in Ethiopia or survived as fragments guarded by the last priests of Isis, resisting the fury of empires that wanted to rewrite history and erase the original source. Spiritually, the presence of these records proves that the expectation of a savior who would be born of light to overcome darkness was an ancient belief deeply rooted in Africa. It is proof that the idea of the solar Messiah, or the one anointed by the sun, has its origins firmly planted and documented in the Nile Valley. Now, if the prophecy was written and the story was known, how was this reborn sun visually recognized? What was the universal symbol of its glory and its direct connection to the cosmos? That circle of light that today adorns the head of every saint and deity who dares to carry the divine within themselves. Look at the head of any deity or saint in the world today. What do you see? A circle of light, golden, an ethereal crown. This symbol, which we call a halo, is the ultimate testament to divine authority, and it has a unique and undeniable origin, the solar disk of the gods of Egypt and Nubia. This disk was not an allegory. It was a direct representation of Ra, the sun. When we see Horus or any other solar god with this ornament, we are seeing cosmic power manifested, light personified. The revelation is that the greatest insignia of sanctity in the West was simply lifted from the heads of African gods and placed in other narratives. The Golden Circle traveled from Africa, passing through Hellenistic cults that absorbed Egyptian culture, and from there, into the iconography of new faiths spreading throughout the world. It became the visual seal that that figure was, in fact, the chosen one, but its African solar root was subtly and conveniently forgotten. Spiritually, the halo represents perfection, eternity, and above all, the channeling of cosmic energy. It reminds us that divinity is pure light. To receive the halo is to receive the authority of the sun, a concept that flourished in the belief that knowledge and enlightenment come from the cosmos. Light and authority were clearly defined. But who, in the historical record, traveled to greet this sun child with the most sacred gifts? Who were the bearers of knowledge who made the long journey, and what was their connection to the golden crowns and African essences that we know so well? We speak of the Magi, those wise men who followed a star. But who were they really? They were not random figures, but astronomers, diplomats, and most likely kings or emissaries from powerful kingdoms, such as Kush and Meroe, who possessed millennia of astronomical knowledge, rivaling Babylon in stellar wisdom. The revelation lies in the gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Gold was synonymous with Nubia, the land of gold, and both frankincense and myrrh were crucial products of African and Arab trade routes. Therefore, the journey to greet the chosen one was led by those who held the keys to the continent's treasure and knowledge, guided by stars they knew how to read. Their journey symbolizes the recognition of the new light by the ancient world and the validation of African knowledge. It is the majesty and wisdom of the continent bowing, not in submission, but in confirmation of a universal prophecy that they themselves helped to document and preserve in their kingdoms. The spiritual unfolding of these gifts is profound. Gold represents solar royalty, frankincense divinity, and myrrh immortality, used in the rituals of Osiris. It is the recognition of the complete cycle of the African god, royal birth, divine status, and promise of resurrection, all encapsulated in three gifts. These kings, these empires, were living proof that Africa was the center from which wealth and knowledge emanated. But how could a continent of such magnitude, which gave birth to the light and symbols of the world, be suddenly relegated to darkness and oblivion, its history erased with such violence? With the rise of empires focused on the Mediterranean and Europe, and the consolidation of new monotheistic faiths, Africa, the cradle of gods and solar rites, became an obstacle. The moment of great conflict arrives, where ancestral knowledge, which taught the birth of light, was marked for erasure. The revelation is stark. The destruction was not an accident. It was a political and theological necessity. For the new story of the Chosen One to have exclusivity and global authority, African sources had to be demonized and their myths co-opted. Temples like that of Isis in Philae, the last great pagan sanctuary, were closed and looted by imperial decree. The cultural journey of our symbols becomes a flight for survival. Statues of Horus and Isis were decapitated, papyri were burned in great libraries, and age-old wisdom was reclassified as witchcraft or folklore. African gods were forced into silence, transformed into ghosts of their own glory. Spiritually, this erasure created a deep wound in memory, severing the people's immediate connection to their divine matrix and their own narratives of power. But true faith is like water. When its source is dammed, it finds underground paths to flow and survive the passage of time. If the temples were destroyed and the texts burned, where did the priests, the guardians of memory, hide the rituals and secrets of the Sun Child? The truth, like gold, was buried, patiently waiting for the moment to be unearthed and revealed, far from the eyes of the persecutors. When the sun of a religion sets under the force of the sword, it does not disappear, it retreats into the shadows. This is the underground journey, the moment when public faith transforms into whispers kept in homes, in catacombs, and in unwavering hearts, far from the sight of the inquisitors. The revelation is that the solstice rituals, the songs for the sun child, did not die out. They survived on the fringes of the empire, kept alive by priestly families in remote oases or hidden in early Coptic monasteries, which secretly honored the principles of Osiris and Horus under new names and figures. The culture of resistance taught the art of adaptation and syncretism. The old symbols were not thrown away, they were juxtaposed, discreetly stitched into the new tapestry of faith. The enforced silence transformed the celebration into an act of profound personal and communal devotion, far from the eyes of the oppressors. Spiritually, the flame of faith, threatened by persecution, grew purer and warmer. The imposed secrecy transformed knowledge into a treasure that could only be transmitted through direct lineage, ensuring that the core of African truth was preserved with utmost reverence through the generations. But, good heavens, why was this story of a god who dies and is reborn in winter so fundamental in Africa? And why does this exact same pattern, the same promise of life after death, appear so clearly in other ancient cultures like Babylon? The mystery lies in the universal root of hope. The principle of death and resurrection, culminating in the birth of hope at the solstice, is not an isolated invention. It is the backbone of countless myths of fertility and renewal throughout the ancient world. Think of Tammuz in Babylon or other mystery figures. The revelation is that humanity, in its awakening, used the same language to describe the cycle of life, and the African version of Osiris/Horus is undoubtedly the oldest and most detailed. The mystery lies not in the coincidence, but in the pattern, the belief that nature, and the cosmos, offers us a model of salvation. Osiris, as the god who resurrects the Nile, was the key to Egypt's survival, and Thomas, to Mesopotamia's fertility. Egyptian culture, throughout its long history, was the main exporter of these symbols and concepts to the Levant and the Mediterranean. The symbolic journey that matters to us is the diffusion of African cosmology, which viewed the divine not as a single event, but as an eternal return. Osiris dies and is reborn not just once, but annually, ensuring the harvest. This cyclical vision is what permeated all the mystery religions of antiquity. The spiritual unfolding here is proof that Africa, with its wisdom about the Nile and the sun, offered the first and most robust model to explain immortality and salvation. It is knowledge that connects us to a time when humankind understood itself as an integral part of, and not separate from, the great cycles of nature. But if Africa gave us the complete model of death and life, what is the most powerful symbol they used to represent the very key to that eternal existence, that promise that life always finds a way, even after crossing the valley of the shadow? It's an icon you know well, but whose truth has been obscured. If Africa gave us the myth of resurrection, the symbol that seals this promise is the Ankh, the key of life. With its unmistakable shape, a T surmounted by a loop, it is the visual representation of immortality, Za, the breath that the gods gave to kings and the dead to guarantee eternal life and fullness. The mystery of the Ankh goes beyond mere adornment. The revelation is that it represents the union of the masculine, the vertical shaft, and feminine, the uterine loop, principles, the primordial source of creation and regeneration. Therefore, it is not only a symbol of life, but of the very capacity to generate and regenerate, the power that Isis used to resurrect Osiris. The Ankh was carried in the hands of the gods, signifying their sovereignty over death and their control over the destiny of souls. Its journey is one of the longest in history, emerging from the Nile Valley to be engraved on amulets, sarcophagi, and later subtly influencing other forms of representation of salvation. Spiritually, the Ankh is the driving force behind African philosophy on the continuity of the soul. It teaches us that death is merely a transition to another form of existence, eternal birth. It is the guarantee that light, life, is never truly extinguished, but only transformed, awaiting the moment to return to the cycle. The wisdom of the Ankh, concerning eternity and life, was not merely faith, but was underpinned by breathtaking scientific knowledge. If the birth of the sun child was the crucial point, which star did these African sages obsessively observe, the celestial body that unfailingly heralded the turning of the cycle and the arrival of the new year? The most striking proof of African wisdom lies in the sky. Consider the Dogon people of Mali and their understanding of the star Sirius, which the Egyptians called Sothis. This celestial body was not merely a point of light, it was the key that unlocked the calendar, announcing the vital flooding of the Nile and the birth of the sacred new year, the precise hour of renewal. The mystery that baffles archaeology is that the Dogon people possessed knowledge of Sirius B, a white dwarf invisible to the naked eye, something we were only able to confirm with powerful telescopes in the 20th century. This is the revelation of an ancestral and forbidden knowledge, a stellar precision that official history insists on ignoring or downplaying. Sothis was, symbolically, the star of Isis, the mother goddess who brings renewal and fertility. Its journey across the sky dictated the timing of rituals, ensuring that the celebration of the sun child was in perfect synchronicity with the cosmos. Africa read the celestial code like no other, integrating science and faith. Spiritually, this mastery of astronomy elevated the African priest to an interpreter of the divine plan. They ensured that the human order, Ma'at, reflected the cosmic order. The calendar, then, was not merely time, it was a sacred map to align the people with the eternal cycles of immortality. Now, if the heavens provided the exact timing of the prophecy, the human body needed to give form to this revelation. How was this profound and spiritual knowledge translated into physical rituals, dances, and masks that recounted, at each solstice, the story of the divine birth, so that the people would never forget? The body and the ritual were the living parchment. In African cultures, myth was not only told, it was performed. Sacred dances and masks, like those of the Dogon or other ethnic groups with rites of passage, were the most powerful way to retell the story of divine birth and the triumph of order. The mask, you see, wasn't a disguise, but a conduit for the divine. By wearing it, the dancer ceased to be himself and became the god or ancestor himself, Horus, the sun, the emerging child. The revelation is that at each solstice, the birth of the chosen one became a physical, real event that the community could touch and deeply feel. Think of the deep rhythm of the drums that summons the spirit, the sacred dust rising from the ground, the heat. The dance reenacts the battle of Set against the light, the struggle for survival, culminating in the explosion of new life. This ritualistic journey was the most effective cultural way of preserving memory in a world where the written word was a privilege. Spiritually, participating in these rites was more than just watching. It was recharging the spirit with the energy of rebirth. It was a collective affirmation that the principle of Osiris/Horus was active and present, guaranteeing that the coming year would be one of fertility and light for all. But when conquest and colonization arrived, what was the first target? It was the drum, the mask, the ritual, because they knew that as long as the people could dance the birth of the sun, their connection to their true history of power would never be broken. And what is the fate, the curse, that befalls those who dare to erase ancestral culture? In African cosmology, punishment does not come from an angry god, but from the breaking of Ma'at, the divine order of the cosmos. If you erase history, if you destroy the source of wisdom, you not only commit a historical crime, you invite chaos. This is the curse of forgetfulness. The revelation is the modern consequence, the political disorientation, loss of identity, and social imbalance that plagued the continent after domination. The erasure of the forbidden Christmas story caused a spiritual void that was filled with doubt and dependence on external narratives. The journey of this curse is seen in generations that grew up believing that nothing sacred or civilized existed in their lands before the arrival of the foreigner. It is the pain of seeking their light in borrowed stories, ignoring the glory that sleeps in their own lineage and ancestral wisdom. Spiritually, ignoring the primary sources, the knowledge of Horus and Isis, is to lose the key to the Ankh, to your own eternal life and purpose. The curse is to live without the authority of your own past, without knowing that you are a direct descendant of the architects of the cosmos. But if this curse of oblivion was so cruelly imposed, the response of the African soul was even more powerful. How did the people who were forced to flee and scatter across the world manage to rescue this ancestral knowledge, rekindling the light of the sun child even in distant lands, such as the Americas? The African soul, separated from its land and forced to cross the ocean, proved to be indomitable. Even under the heaviest yoke, the principles of the sun and rebirth found ways to flourish, giving rise to powerful spiritual manifestations in the diaspora. Look at the celebration of Kwanzaa in the Americas, with its principles of unity, purpose, and cooperative economics. The revelation is that this year-end festival is a modern echo of the harvest and solstice rituals of ancient Africa, a way of ensuring community well-being, the Maya. The essence of the birth of light has survived, adapted, but intact. The cultural journey of reclaiming their heritage lies in how the sons and daughters of Africa have rebuilt their identity, celebrating life, family, and history, reviving the 7 principles. It is the sound of the drum that has not been silenced, the light of the candle that has not been extinguished, a powerful return to origins through practice and memory. Spiritually, the diaspora teaches us that the truth about divine birth and resurrection is not the property of one people, but a genetic code of the African soul. It is a reaffirmation that the source of light and civilization is not outside, but within the ancestral lineage that has survived. The story, finally, is complete. The mother, the sun, the cycle, the star, and the right. Having traced the path of each symbol, we are ready for the final truth. What is the revelation that seals once and for all the fact that the forbidden Christmas is, in reality, a mosaic of ancestral African rites repackaged for the world? Look back, from the golden circle that adorns the saints to the evergreen tree that promises us life. What we do at the solstice, from the bonfires to the offerings, is a repetition of a rite that originated on the banks of the Nile. The moment of final revelation has arrived, when all the pieces fall into place. The truth is that the forbidden Christmas is not a secret invention. It is the very spiritual cradle of humanity repackaged for new eras. The divine birth, the Virgin Mother, the child son who triumphs over darkness. These are the pillars of the African cosmology of Horus, the principle that never dies. The symbolic journey is complete. The northern empires, as they expanded, did not create their faith from scratch. They absorbed, adapted, and renamed the powerful African matrix, ensuring the continuity of belief in the cycle of death and resurrection, but erasing its origin. Spiritually, understanding this lineage is not denying the sacred. It is honoring it in its oldest and most profound form. It is recognizing that Africa was the first to codify the secret of eternity, proving its irrefutable authority over the drama of human salvation. But ultimately, what does this revelation change in your life? How does the knowledge that your faith has black and ancestral roots in Egypt and Kush transform your worldview, your politics, and your identity in the present moment? Even when the drums were forbidden and memory seemed condemned to oblivion, the African soul did not surrender. The pain of the crossing and the separation from the sacred land forced wisdom to become resilient, to metamorphose, but never to die. The principle of the ever-returning sun became the very code of survival in lands of exile. The mystery is how, thousands of kilometers from Kemet and Kush, the people managed to revive rituals with the same essence as the ancestral solstice. The revelation lies in celebrations like Kwanzaa in the Americas, a modern festivity that, at its core, recovers the principles of harvest, unity, umoja, and purpose, nia. These are the same pillars of Ma'at and the celebration of the new cycle that guarantees the renewal of life. The journey is a testament to faith and the recreation of identity. Without the stone temples, the community became the temple. Without the Nile, the family became the source of life. The celebration of Kwanzaa and other manifestations show that the spirit of the sun child, the hope and fertility of the new year, is what nourishes the people of the diaspora. The spiritual unfolding of this practice is monumental. It proves that ancestral light did not need external authorization to shine again. By reclaiming the principles of unity and collective responsibility, the diaspora affirms its heritage, proving that authority over its own spirituality and history resides within itself. The cycle is almost complete. We have seen the origin, the erasure, and the rebirth in the diaspora. All the evidence points to an inescapable conclusion. Now, what does it mean for the world today that the greatest festival of light and hope has undeniable roots in the cosmology of the African gods? Look once more, the mother nursing her child, the golden crown of the sun, the gifts brought by the kings of the south, the tree that stubbornly clings to the darkness. What remains for us, after tracing each step of the symbol, the rite, and the prophecy, is to face the final revelation without fear and with reverence. The truth is that the Forbidden Christmas is not a parallel narrative, it is the backbone of the universal tale. The modern celebration of the birth of the Chosen One is a magnificent cultural mosaic whose deepest foundations, the virgin birth, the cyclical resurrection, and the triumph of light, were transported from the cosmology of Osiris and Horus. The symbolic journey is complete. The world did not invent the mystery of salvation in winter, it inherited it from Africa, adapting it so that faith could survive through the ages. It is irrefutable proof of the continuity of the sacred idea through the centuries, even when the name of God needed to change. Spiritually, this is an act of profound honor to the past. Recognizing this lineage is not to diminish modern faith, but to enrich it, attesting to the depth and validity of African wisdom as a primary source of humanity's spiritual drama. The light is now fully shining on ancestral truth. But what to do with this light? How does the knowledge that your own spiritual and historical identity has undeniable African roots transform the way you see yourself, how you interact with politics, and how you practice your faith in today's world? History isn't just a collection of dusty dates, folks. It's the lifeblood of our identity. Understanding the Forbidden Christmas and the African gods that inspired it isn't a mere detail, but a force that redefines our perception of faith and civilization. The most important revelation for the present is the restoration of authority. The knowledge that the cradle of the concepts of resurrection and divine birth is in Africa dismantles the colonial narrative that placed it on the periphery of sacred thought and not at its center. Your journey is complete, and the reward is liberation. No longer a prisoner of incomplete stories, you now possess the complete map of the origin of light. This knowledge is power. It is the fuel for the affirmation of cultural and spiritual identity in the diaspora and on the continent. Spiritually, we understand that Ma'at, the cosmic order of the Africans, is the universal law that governs life. By celebrating the solstice with the awareness of Horus, Isis, and the Ankh, your faith, whatever it may be, is enriched by the depth of the world's oldest wisdom. The cycle is complete. The flame, lit millennia ago, is still burning. The secret has been revealed, and Africa reclaims its throne as the primary source of wisdom that teaches us that the light always returns, no matter how long the night. The veil has been lifted, the truth is among us, and the light of the solstice shines brighter. We learned that sacred birth is not a borrowed story, but an inalienable legacy. Africa gave us the model, the divinity, the symbol of resurrection, and the promise that the sun, your inner sun, will always return. This is the true magnitude of ancestral heritage, a power that no one can confiscate. May this knowledge set you free and fill you with wonder at the depth of human history. Honor the drum, honor the papyrus, honor the forgotten gods, for they are the root of your faith and your wisdom. But understand this, the sands of time hold infinite secrets. Many mysteries still sleep beneath the stars of Kush and Kemet, waiting for the right moment to awaken and challenge history once more. Don't let the light go out. If you felt the call of this ancient wisdom, subscribe and turn on notifications. Join us as we unearth the next forbidden truth from Africa.